Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. I've been up since before the ash started to fall. It moves like fog some mornings, soft and slow, almost pretty if you didn't know what it meant. Today it came in light, drifting sideways across the yard like grey feathers shaken loose from a dying sky. The burn fields to the south have been smouldering again. Could be a buried vein of wiring caught flame, or maybe just something dead lighting up one last time under the sun. Either way, the smoke's thick enough that it's hard to tell where the air ends and the world begins. I'm standing on top of the reefer container, one boot on the vent housing, the other planted near a cracked solar panel we keep for the radio. It still charges if the clouds stay thin, but only barely. I keep meaning to fix the wiring, but something always comes up. Something always needs me more. Below me, the Barter post stirs to life. I don't need to look to know the order of it. Gulza's dogs will start first. Low growls, then loud angry barks once they realize no one's fed them yet. Then Gulza himself, shouting curses in 3 languages, while he untangles their chains and waves a dented soup can in one hand. Somewhere in the welding shed, the twins will knock over a crate looking for sugar or salt, maybe both. By the time the front gate chain groans open and the main yard floods with rust-colored light, we're already alive for another day, or something close enough to call it. I built this place out of what was left when everyone else stopped pretending the world could be put back the way it was. Shipping containers welded together in an L pattern, stacked too high, boxed in by tire walls, broken fencing, and a few layers of spike chain dragged in from the old freeway checkpoint. There's one entrance, narrow enough to funnel a crowd, strong enough to hold if that crowd turns fast. The infected don't come this way much anymore, not since the firestorm anyway. The scorched concrete and brittle ground snap their bones underfoot, and they seem to know it. If there's a mercy in any of this, it's that the dead avoid the ash-blasted zones. They rot faster there, burn from the inside out. Still, it's not the infected that make the Barter post dangerous. It's us, the people who survived long enough to lie, cheat, and trade our way toward another sunrise. The runners, the mercenaries, the so-called free pilgrims, the smugglers and grave pickers, the cannibals who learned to smile just right, the ones with too much blood on their hands and nowhere else to go. We all end up here eventually, either to barter, to beg, or to take. I didn't ask for this job. I just happened to be the last one standing when the others burned. I spot movement near the south bend, just beyond the melted road signs and crumbled overpass where the ash drifts deepest. It's a figure walking alone, low to the ground, dragging something heavy wrapped in a dirty grey tarp. I watch her for a full minute before I move. The gait is familiar, short, tight steps. Right leg dragging just enough to catch the gravel every 3rd stride. That's Cara. She's been gone 9 days. Told me she was going to scavenge the basements beneath the high towers downtown, where the heat was lowest and the odds worst. Nobody comes back from that. But she did. By the time I climb down from the reefer container and cross the yard, Gulza's already opening the gate. The crank wheezes, and the rusted cattle grate slides open just wide enough for a body. Cara slips through without looking at any of us, her shoulders hunched, the tarp dragging behind her like a broken promise. She looks thinner, paler. Her sleeve is torn at the elbow, and her lips split, but she's walking steady. That's all that matters. "What did you bring?" I ask her, keeping my tone flat but not unfriendly. She doesn't answer, just kneels beside the burn barrel near the west wall, unwraps the tarp slowly, and rolls its contents into the open with a dull, wet thud. Not food, not medicine, a severed head, human, male, eyes stitched shut, mouth gaping in a silent scream. There's a symbol branded into the skin above the collarbone, a circle with 4 lines radiating outward. The Fire Watch. Raiders, zealots, executioners of their own strange religion. They believe infection is sacred, fire is purifying, and the rest of us are weak for running. "They're marking bodies again," Cara says, not looking at me. "I saw 3 nailed to a signpost west of the old church. Dogs, too." The heat from the barrel catches the edge of the tarp, and the flame begins to crawl toward the face. Cara doesn't move. She just watches the brand bubble and peel away from the skin as the fire consumes it. I turn and call over to Mosley, who's been pretending not to listen from the shade of the water tower. Pull Kenner off salvage, double the west guard, use the old mattress coils if you have to. Make it look mean. Mosley gives a nod, says nothing, and disappears behind the southern wall. That's how we work here. Short orders, no questions. Not because I rule with fear, but because we've all seen what happens when things slip. I look back at Cara. Her hands are still black with soot and dried blood. I offer her the cot in the welding shed and tell her to eat something. She doesn't reply, just walks off without a word, her boots trailing a thin line of grey behind her. By midday, the ash has settled into drifts. Light wind keeps the air moving, but the smoke from the burn field still clings to the ground like a warning. It's trade day. Every few days we open the post to outsiders, let them through one at a time to swap whatever they've got for whatever we have. Reputation is everything here. Currency is dead. What matters now is what people say when your name comes up, whether you're trustworthy enough to walk in armed and leave alive. 3 caravans roll in over the next hour. The first brings cages of half-starved rabbits and dried moss for insulation. The second has an old forklift battery they're hoping to swap for fuel tabs. But it's the third group that makes everyone quiet. 3 figures, 2 men, 1 woman. No flags, no faction colors, no visible infection. But there's something off about the way they stand, like they're used to being in charge and just pretending to be polite. The lead man carries a halberd fashioned out of a fire axe welded to a pipe wrench. Crude, but not stupid. I step forward to meet them, gloved hands in view. "You running this place?" the leader asks, scanning the yard like he's already planning angles. I nod. That's right. He points to a sled they're dragging. Salt pork, scavenged meds, and copper wire. We need ammunition and information. I glance at their sled. The pork's rough cut and not cured right, but it's edible. The meds are sealed, probably salvaged from a hospice, and the copper's burned but intact. I nod toward the table where Kenner's already standing guard and motion for them to lay out their trade. While Kenner counts, the man leans in slightly. We're looking for someone. Black vest, red scarf, tattoo on her throat. Says forgiven. My eyes flicker toward the sleeping shed, but I keep my voice neutral. She was here, 9 days ago, left on foot, westbound. He doesn't react the way I expect. No relief, no anger, just a quiet recalculation, like ticking off a box on a long list of unfinished business. He doesn't ask her name, doesn't ask where she went or who she left with, just accepts the ammo and turns to leave, silent as he came. As he passes, I offer a final warning. Don't go east, Firewatch is branding again. He stops for half a second, grips his halberd tighter, and mutters without looking back, "Let them try." By nightfall, the temperature drops and the sky turns copper red, as if the sun is trying to burn through the smoke one last time before quitting. The shadows from the tire walls stretch long across the yard, and the dogs start to whine. Not bark, whine, that's worse. Means they smell something they can't see. I grab the thermal monocular and scan the ridge to the south. A fresh marker stands near the bend. New rebar spike driven into the dirt with a skull mounted on top. Jaw still attached. The flies haven't found it yet. I didn't put that there. I turn to Mosley again, my voice low. Add another layer to the west fence tonight. Sheet steel. Tie it down tight. You think they'll test it? He asks, already pulling his gloves back on. I don't answer right away. The smoke is thick out there, and something just shifted behind the tree line. Could have been ash. Could have been worse. They're watching, I say finally. Maybe not tonight, but soon. Everyone always comes back for what's left. There's a rhythm to this place, an uneasy cycle of noise, smoke, and silence that repeats every few days. You learn to read the gaps. When the dogs go quiet in the morning, it usually means the wind shifted. When Gulza's too tired to yell, something's wrong in the yard. When Cara doesn't show up for a full day after returning from a run, you don't knock on the shed door. You wait and watch for the shadow to move beneath the curtain. There are rules here. None of them are written, but they're carved into us just the same. It's been 2 days since she dragged that branded head into camp and burned it. Since the man with the halberd asked about the girl with the forgiven tattoo. The air hasn't cleared since. Every sunrise starts the same. Low grey light bleeding into the ash clouds. Shadows stretching long across the cracked yard. Smoke curling out of the hills like breath from a dying animal. It's the kind of light that makes everything look a little unreal, like the world stuck between states, waiting for something to decide whether it's still alive. We lost contact with the refinery caravan this morning. They were due back last night with diesel drums and brake fluid. 3 people went out with a flatbed mule and 6 hours of daylight to cover 18 miles of scorched highway. We gave them enough fire-retardant foam packs to block a lane if the ash drifts were too deep, enough flare caps to signal back twice. We didn't see anything. No flashes, no smoke trails, just more quiet. Mosley was the first to say it out loud. They're not coming back. Nobody argued. No false optimism. You don't survive this long by pretending missing people just got lost. If they're not back by second sunrise, they're either dead or worse, on someone else's chain, stripped of their gear and dignity. I checked the radio again just to be sure. Tuned it to 7.580 megahertz, where we set the rotating broadcast for team pings. Nothing but static and ghost signals. Old traffic control loops from the city center still bleeding out over dead air. At least once a week, we hear the same 30-second emergency alert from a now-defunct emergency station near the bay. This is an official broadcast of the Civil Stability Bureau. Shelter in place. Assistance is inbound. It hasn't been true in 800 days. After we passed the second sun mark and still heard nothing, I called it official. The refinery route was closed until further notice. I pulled the assignment from the board, chalked a red X over the flatbed icon, and left it there as a warning. Nobody likes red marks on the board. They mean less diesel, less trade leverage, fewer tools to keep the lights working. But more than that, they mean no one's safe, not even on a known route. That's when the wagon showed up. Not a proper one either, just a 2-wheel salvage cart being dragged by one man and one limping dog. The man was sunburned raw, shirtless under an armored vest, face covered in streaks of black ash that clung to him like mold. His boots were duct-taped at the seams. The dog had a makeshift bandage wrapped tight around its back leg. Too tight, really, which told me the man wasn't exactly a medic. What caught my attention wasn't the condition of the traveler. It was what he was dragging. Chained to the back of the wagon, ankles bound, wrists zip-tied, and throat muzzled with 3 layers of surgical wrap, was a living infected, emaciated female, her mouth moving behind the wrap in that slow, broken rhythm I've seen too many times. She wasn't freshly turned. This was a long-term walker, her flesh hardened and grayed, her movements sluggish but still present. She wasn't trying to attack. She wasn't resisting, just followed behind the cart on bleeding feet, one step at a time, like a dog that had been broken too many times to think of running. I motioned to Mosley to hold his fire and stepped to the edge of the yard, watching the man approach. When he got close enough, I saw the look in his eyes. Not hunger, not madness, calculating interest. He had something he thought I wanted. "I need water," he said, his voice rough from ash and sun. "And a cot. You can have her." The yard went silent. Gulzar stepped out of the shed, hand resting on the grip of the bolt gun we use for livestock when trade goes wrong. I could feel Cara watching from the top of the reefer, just behind the tarp line where she usually sits in the mornings. I didn't answer right away, walked a full circle around the cart, checking the welds on the wheel housing, noting the makeshift braces where someone had reinforced the axle using copper rods and window frame brackets. This man had built his cart to last. That told me he'd been dragging it for a long time, which meant he'd been keeping that infected alive for longer than I wanted to think about. "You feeding it?" I asked finally, keeping my tone even. "Just enough," he said. "I cut the tendons in both hands. She can't grip anything, and I seared her molars. She can't chew." The words didn't seem to trouble him. He said them like someone describing maintenance on a damaged machine. No hate, no joy, just facts. "What do you want for her?" He shrugged. "Nothing. I'll give her to you. Long as you give me a place to sit and a drink of something clean." I looked at the woman again. if she could still be called that. Her eyes were milky, but not white. Her breath came slow, ragged. She was aware, conscious, but the infection had hollowed her out. Whatever remained was somewhere in the cracks. I said yes, not because I wanted the thing, but because I needed to know why someone would walk 30 miles dragging a nearly dead infected behind them like a prize. We set him up in the quarantine cage behind the water tower and gave him a filtered jug and a heat pack. The dog, to its credit, stayed quiet the whole time, leaning against its master's leg and panting in short, shallow bursts. I ordered Cara and Mosley to help me chain the infected in the south pen. We used triple lock manacles, a steel pole through the cinder floor, and reinforced mesh fencing. She didn't resist, just sat when we pushed her down, her mouth still working behind the gauze like she was trying to remember words that no longer meant anything. That night, I sat across from the man outside the welding shed, both of us on overturned barrels, drinking lukewarm water and pretending it wasn't mixed with soot from the rooftop gutters. His name was Dale. No last name given, no details offered. Said he used to be a corrections officer before everything fell apart. Told me he kept the infected woman for over 4 months. Fed her broth through a tube. Carried her on a stretcher at first, then forced her to walk until she obeyed commands. I asked why. I wanted to prove it, he said. Prove what? That the line isn't real. The line between what's gone and what's left. Everyone acts like it's a switch. 1 second human, next second monster. But it's slower, dirtier. The mind doesn't go all at once. You can talk to them sometimes. You just have to listen hard enough. By morning, the pen was exactly as we'd left it. The infected woman, if that's still what she was, remained chained in place, folded into a sitting position with her back against the anchor post. Her eyes tracked the movement of birds overhead, but didn't flinch when Golzar tossed a half-empty bottle near her to test her reflexes. The gauze muzzle had loosened slightly but stayed intact, and there was no sign of aggression, no attempt to lunge. She blinked slowly, lips moving like someone trying to finish a sentence they started days ago. Dale was already packing up by the time I stepped out into the yard. He'd unlashed the tarp from his cart and laid out some copper wire, a half spool of paracord, and what looked like a small solar inverter cracked down one side. He didn't say anything when I walked up, just nodded once and nudged the gear toward me with the toe of his boot. I didn't ask why he was leaving, and he didn't offer an explanation. That's how most goodbyes happen out here, quietly, without too much weight. He took one last drink from the water jug we'd let him keep, whistled for the dog, and walked through the front gate like he already knew where he was going next. The ash was thick that morning, and within a minute he was just another shape moving into the haze. Mosley watched from the corner platform. You think he'll survive out there with that limp mutt and half a cart of junk? Doesn't matter, I said. He already did what he came here to do. That evening, Cara secured the pen again, adding a second set of padlocks to the gate and reinforcing the mesh with wire drawn from a strip of scavenged fencing. She didn't speak as she worked, but I could tell she was studying the infected, watching the way her fingers twitched every time a shadow passed overhead, or how her head tilted slightly toward voices, even if she didn't react. By sundown, the wind had picked up, and smoke from the southern hills was curling into the upper yard. I marked a new entry on the board, specimen, trade pending, and scratched the date below it. We didn't know what we'd do with her yet, but we knew someone eventually would offer something for her. Everything out here has value to someone, even what used to be people. And just after dark, when the dogs quieted and the ash started falling straight instead of sideways, I heard the first low thump of drums echoing from the fire line east of the old church. Not thunder, not tools, drums. The fire watch had moved closer, and they were bringing a rhythm we hadn't heard in weeks. The next few days passed with a sense of uneasy routine. A handful of traders came through, some with decent goods, salted meat, salvaged wiring, a stash of water tabs that still hissed when opened. We had a few skirmishes between locals, nothing serious, just the kind of tension that builds when people carry more secrets than supplies. Evenings were quieter, a couple games of cards played for single rounds of ammo, old jokes passed around like they still mattered, and the fire crackling under a sky that hadn't shown stars in months. For a while, it felt almost manageable. But then came the fourth morning. Dull light, smoke already rolling low across the yard. And with it, the kind of trouble that doesn't knock first. The ash wasn't falling heavy, just a few lazy flecks drifting in from the southeast where the ridges still smoked. The dogs weren't restless, and even Gulzar's usual screaming match with the twins over missing rations had sounded more tired than angry. The kind of morning where you start believing, briefly, that the day might go quiet. I was on top of the reefer container again, cataloguing the dry storage and cross-checking the marked goods with the board. We'd gone through 2 full gallons of kerosene in the last 6 days. Too much for the way we ration light. And I wanted to make sure someone hadn't been burning it to boil water in private. That kind of selfishness grows fast when the nights get colder. Mosley was just bringing in the last 2 traders from the south checkpoint when the commotion started. It was a sound that didn't belong. Not yelling, not even shouting. A deep impact, flesh on bone, then another. Then the hard scrape of something metal against dirt, followed by a snap that I knew immediately wasn't wood. Then screams. Real ones, from more than one mouth. I was halfway down the rebar ladder before someone yelled for me by name. Kenner's voice, strained but clear. "Boss, square, now!" By the time I hit the ground and made it to the edge of the main yard, the fight was already over. The guards had moved in, and 2 men were on the dirt, bloodied and restrained. One was pinned face down, boot on his spine, arms twisted behind him and zip-tied tight. The other was curled against the base of the trade table, his shoulder at a grotesque angle, and his mouth open in a constant string of groans as the pain rolled through him. His shirt was soaked at the midsection, stab wound, shallow, but ugly. A discarded blade sat a few feet away, slick with red, half buried in the ash. 3 civilians were sitting against the wall of the welding shed, hands pressed to their wounds, none fatal but none clean either. Gulzar's apprentice was one of them, clutching his thigh with a dirty rag. The twins had fled to the top of the storage stacks, and standing dead center of it all, red-faced and furious, was Verno, the spice merchant. His nose looked broken, and his left arm hung limp at his side. He was seething through clenched teeth. "They tried to rob me," he spat when I walked up, said my salt packs were underweight, started screaming about being cheated. Then this one. He kicked at the man with the broken arm, swung on me like I'd spat in his food. Mosley spoke from my right side, arms folded across his chest, breathing hard. "Took us 5 minutes to drop them. Would have been quicker if the tall one hadn't grabbed a blade off the stall. Cut 2 of ours trying to hold him." I nodded once and turned to the new arrivals. I'd seen them before, barely, in a caravan a few weeks back. They hadn't come close enough to trade, just passed by on the ridge, watching from the smoke. This time they came in solo, no flag, no introductions. At the gate, the guards had already confiscated 2 weapons, a rusted AK with a plastic stock and a homemade breech pistol that shot metal bearings. We tagged both and locked them in the bin like always. Good thing we did. The man with the dislocated shoulder had stopped groaning and was watching me now with quiet, simmering hate. His lip was split, and blood was leaking from one nostril. His eyes kept darting from me to the people gathered around the square, gauging his audience. "You got 5 seconds to make this right," he said, voice strained but deliberate. "You touch me again, I'll burn this post to the dirt. Next time I'm bringing my crew. 40 men. You'll all be ash." The threat didn't even ripple through the crowd. Not here. Not this deep into the zone, where talk like that only ever ends one way. But I could see the hesitation in some of the younger guards. The kind that comes when someone talks about bringing numbers. I didn't want that seed growing. I turned back to Verno. "You want compensation or justice?" He didn't blink. "Justice." "Then you kill him." The merchant scowled. My arms busted. "I can't lift anything." I nodded. "Then I'll do it for you." The tall one's face changed, not with fear, but disbelief. Like he thought the threat had bought him more time, like he couldn't fathom that the line had already been crossed. I walked forward and signaled Mosley to lift him up. He resisted once, just once. Then I drew the sidearm from my vest holster and put one round through his skull before he could spit another word. He dropped like meat. The other man, the one who'd gone for the blade, flinched but didn't speak. His hands were already stained with the blood of the wounded. I looked at him, then at the gates. "You're finished here," I told him. "No water, no trade. You set foot anywhere within 10 miles of this fire zone again, we drop you where you stand. And if I so much as spot one of your people heading toward this gate, I'll put them down before they get a word out. That clear?" He didn't answer, just gave a slow, shallow nod, like he finally understood the cost. We cut the zip ties, shoved a strip of torn tarp into his hands to wrap his wounds, and walked him to the gate without another word. No weapons, no partner, no second chance. Just Ash and road ahead of him. I turned back to the square. Everyone had seen it. That was the point. "This post stays open because it has rules," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. "We trade here because we enforce them. You don't have to like the terms. But if you raise a hand, if you threaten blood, if you draw a weapon, there is no second chance. This is not a sanctuary. This is order, and you trade under it, or you don't trade at all." The silence that followed was tight, not fearful, solid. People nodded. The guards reset. Verno let himself be led to the infirmary by one of the twins, mumbling curses and favoring his arm. By late afternoon, the body was gone. We didn't bury him. We never bury rule breakers. He went into the burn trench like anyone who threatens the post. Cara didn't ask why it happened. She just crossed his name off the gate list and re-chalked the corner with a new phrase. No credit, no second chance. That evening, after the ash settled again, I saw something strange in the pen. The infected woman, the one Dale brought, was standing. Not swaying, not twitching, just standing, her eyes fixed on the platform above her, where Cara sat cleaning a coil of cable. She wasn't snarling, wasn't moaning, just watching. When I called Cara down for dinner, she didn't mention it. But the next morning, she asked if we could feed it something that wasn't broth, just to see what would happen. The weather held for 2 days. The ash drifted thinly east. The heat from the hills stayed low, and no one bled in the yard. Those are the stretches that feel most dangerous, when nothing happens, when the quiet goes on too long. That kind of stillness makes people itch, like something's winding up somewhere just out of view. I spent most of the morning rechecking supply counts. We were running light on pressure-sealed protein packs and low-gauge wire, things we usually picked up from the northern convoys when they rolled through every 2 weeks. They hadn't been by in almost a month. Word was they'd taken a longer route around the scorched highway where the old river bridge had collapsed, but we'd heard nothing official, just smoke signals and guesswork. The radio wasn't catching any useful chatter. Then, just before midday, they showed up. Not in a column like before, but staggered. 2 lead trucks wrapped in salvaged armor, a 6-wheeled fuel hauler, and a salvage trailer hauling crates under worn tarps. 3 outriders circled ahead on dirt bikes with scorched mufflers and filter masks strapped to their necks. They kept their distance until Mosley flagged them in. I met the lead driver at the gate. His name was Connell, Northern Trade Facilitator, older than he looked. Sun-split skin and a clipboard strapped to his thigh like that still meant something. He got right to it. "We're short on fuses and wheels, got solar sheeting and iodine kits to trade, and we heard you're housing something unusual." I didn't answer immediately, just led him past the yard and toward the south pen. I could feel Cara watching us from the corner platform, arms folded, rifle slung low. She'd become more protective lately, not just of the post, but of the infected woman in the pen. The way she looked at her had changed. Less caution, more calculation. Connell studied the infected silently for a full minute. The woman stood near the gate, not moving, her eyes glassy but alert. The chain around her ankle had been shortened to a quarter length to keep her from touching the bars. Still, she made no attempt, just watched. "That's not a feral," he said eventually. "No," I replied. "Been restrained for months, brought in by a scavenger, still aware, doesn't attack unless provoked. And you've kept her here, fed her. She's never bit anyone, doesn't make noise. We wanted to see what she could be worth." Connell gave a slow nod, the kind you give when you're weighing something more than just trade value. We'll offer 2 barrels of diesel and a sealed nitrate stash. Also 2 containers of long-life rations. In return, we take her north, alive. Cara was down from the platform in seconds, face tight. You're selling her? I didn't flinch. We trade what we have. She's not cargo, Cara said, stepping between us. You don't know what they'll do to her up there. She's infected, Connell replied coolly. What do you think this world is now? We don't throw away what still functions. It would have turned into an argument, but the dogs went wild before anyone could respond. Not the usual bark, panic sounds, high-pitched warning, feet scrambling at the dirt. Mosley was already on the gate tower when I turned. 2 figures stood just outside the entrance, cloaked in long fire-weather robes, faces obscured by welding masks painted with red symbols. The Firewatch. They didn't approach, just stood silently with hands visible, making sure we saw they were unarmed. I told Cara and Connell to stay back and took 2 guards with me as I stepped toward the gate. The one on the left raised a hand in greeting, slow and deliberate. His voice, when he spoke, was calm. Too calm. There's no need for more loss today. Let us speak. I nodded once. You're speaking. He introduced himself as Orlan, said he was an emissary for a larger group now gathering along the old aqueduct trails east of the church ruins. Claimed they'd suffered losses too. Said that all sides had bled enough. He didn't beg. He didn't posture. He offered something instead. We know this place runs on trade and control. We offer a second post. We supply medicine and fuel. You open the gates for us. Share supplies. No more blood. I looked past him at the second figure. Shorter, breathing fast. Nervous. Probably not used to negotiating. Probably used to carrying bodies instead. You want me to open this yard to your faction, I said flatly. We want to ensure peace. You burned the last caravan that didn't yield, I reminded them. Orlan shrugged. That was before there was an agreement. I didn't give them another word. I raised my hand, and both were dropped by Mosley and Gulzar from above. 2 silenced shots, clean through the head. The third Firewatch figure bolted from behind the ridge, then 2 more, farther back. They scattered. Cara stepped past me, took position behind a barricade, and without waiting for permission, opened fire. The scope clicked once, then again, then again. 3 more down before they could vanish into the ash. We don't let them go, she said. They always come back. Her voice was cold, not shaking. She didn't look proud, just certain. I didn't argue. We locked the gate again, burned the bodies where they fell, and reset the perimeter watch with double rifles posted at each tower. The air smelled like copper and melted vinyl, and no one said much as the fire took what was left of the Firewatch emissaries. Connell didn't offer comment on the executions, but he stayed close to the trade trailer and kept his men quiet. Cara, meanwhile, remained on edge, eyes scanning the ridgelines long after the flames burned down to coals. When she passed me near the reefer steps, she paused just long enough to ask, "You're not really going to give her to them, are you?" I didn't answer right away. We were past the point of quick answers. "Tomorrow," I said finally. "You and Connell sit down, talk it through. If you've got something just as valuable to trade, we'll keep her. But if not, she goes north. You want her. You take responsibility, including if it means putting her down yourself. Tonight we rest. Nothing more." Cara gave a sharp nod and walked off without another word. Her shoulders stayed tense, and I knew she wouldn't sleep. But it wasn't over. Not yet. It started just after midnight, when the post had gone quiet and the ash was falling straight down in thin silver lines. The first sound came low, a murmur barely louder than wind through chain link, not the usual moans of distant roamers or the half-mad howling of strays. This was something else. Shuffling, panting, measured footfalls like a staggered patrol. A rhythm, the kind that doesn't come from the mindless dead. I climbed to the platform, nightscope in hand, and swept the southern slope. What I saw didn't make sense at first. Dozens of infected, but not running. Not how they usually move. They were being guided. A loose V formation staggered across the flats, slow and organized. At the edges of the group, I spotted human shapes moving with them, covered in blackened tarps, limbs slicked with something wet and dark. Intestines. Rot. Camouflage. It hit me then. They were leading the horde. People had smeared themselves with infected viscera and were directing the dead, using scent and noise to guide them like cattle. I'd heard stories of it but never seen it in action. It wasn't perfect. The infected still wandered, but some were drifting too close to our fence, drawn by the firelight or motion. I grabbed the crank radio and ordered silence across the yard. No sudden light. No sound. We cut the barrels. No voices. We watched. 2 infected stumbled too close to the east fence and hit the spike wall. No shrieks. Just soft impacts and the sound of bones cracking on contact. One staggered back. The other collapsed and writhed. The herd kept moving past us, oblivious, kept on leash by whatever monsters were guiding them forward. They weren't coming for us. Not yet. But they knew where we were. And now, someone else knew how to steer death. We waited hours before lighting the watchfires again. Cara didn't leave her post once. Connell's men slept in shifts, weapons drawn. I stood outside the pen, staring at the infected woman chained in place. She didn't look up, but I swear, for a moment, her lips moved, shaping something that could have been a word. Then she fell still again, and the night went on. The deal closed just after noon the next day. Clear skies, no wind, light ash. Exactly the kind of weather that made people feel bold. Cara and Connell sat down inside the old machine shop, away from the others, with Mosley standing at the door, and me just far enough out of earshot to give them space. I didn't need to hear the full pitch. I trusted Cara to make her argument, and I trusted Connell to weigh it against the numbers. When they stepped out, I could tell by their faces it was settled. She'd offered 2 full crates of surgical-grade iodine pads, 2 spools of pure copper wire, and a stripped-down portable generator that had been sitting under a tarp since winter. All ours, technically, but Cara had bartered and stockpiled them over months from scavengers, backroom deals, and runners who owed her favors. The fact that she was willing to cash it all in told me she wasn't bluffing. She wanted the infected woman, and she was willing to put skin in the game. I got supplies to trade, and Cara got what she wanted. That's good enough for me for now. Connell accepted the terms without fanfare. They shook on it. I marked the entry on the board under infection property, transferred to Cara, and added a second lock to the pen gate, key labeled and placed under her watch. Connell's convoy rolled out by late afternoon, back north toward whatever frozen market they ran up there. He never looked back at the pen. Maybe it bothered him more than he let on. For a few hours, the yard felt lighter. Nobody argued. The twins got the fire drum burning clean. Gulza grilled canned rabbit, and for the first time in weeks, I heard someone laugh hard enough to cough. I let it go. Even if it was temporary, you take peace when it shows up, but peace never lasts long out here. It started with a trader named Vetch, an old runner from the central corridor who bartered medical scraps and refitted respirators. He came in the next morning with a fresh bandage around his shoulder and a strange story to match. "I ran into someone in the East Pass," he said. "Looked like a scavenger. Alone, no weapon visible. But he flagged me down and said he had a message. Not for me, for the camp." I frowned. What kind of message? Vetch hesitated, shifting his weight like he wasn't sure how much to believe of what he'd heard. Said we'd been marked, that we'd broken a contract, that someone inside's been making deals behind your back. Then he walked into the ash and vanished. My stomach turned, not from fear, but recognition. Someone was fishing, probing for cracks. That kind of message wasn't just meant to warn. It was bait, designed to sow distrust. I asked Vetch for details, but he didn't have much else. Just a face obscured by a welder's hood and a rope belt with red cloth tied to it. Firewatch again, or a faction that splintered from them. Later that evening, while checking the eastern perimeter, I found a crude effigy hanging from the fence. Human bones wired together with barbed scrap, soaked in what might have been oil or blood. In its chest, a melted audio player tied with twine. It clicked weakly as I turned it on, but no sound played. Just static and the faint crackle of something that had already been erased. It wasn't a threat. It was a signal. Someone had been here. Recently. Close enough to tie this thing to our fence without being noticed. That night, Cara moved the infected woman from the south pen to the rear of the welding shed, just a few yards away from the inner yard. She reinforced the window shutters and added a sliding lock to the main door. Said it was temporary. Said she needed to observe her in quieter surroundings. I didn't argue, but I logged it on the board and reminded her, if something goes wrong, it's on you. She nodded, but she didn't look away from the woman when I said it. Over the next few days, things started going strange. First, one of Golza's dogs went missing. No blood, no broken chain, just gone from its tether. Then, a delivery runner from the west reported seeing smoke signals rising in grid patterns along the fire break, communication markings, usually used by bigger caravans or raiding bands. But these weren't normal smoke flares. They were tinted, green, orange, and once, a faint purple. Coordinated signaling that required timing and equipment. Whoever was out there was organized. Then the strangest thing happened. The infected woman began responding to commands. Not complex ones, nothing that would suggest memory or true cognition. But Cara swore that when she clapped once, the woman looked up. When she clapped twice, she stood. She never spoke, never made a sound, but she reacted. Consistently, repeatably. I didn't believe it until I saw it with my own eyes. One afternoon, in full daylight, I stood outside the shed as Cara knocked a wrench twice against the doorframe. The woman stood and faced the sound. It wasn't a flinch. It was recognition. I had no explanation. We discussed it late that night in the tower. She's not feral, Cara said, quiet, like admitting something half-true. She's infected, but she isn't gone. Whatever this thing does to people, it doesn't erase them outright. It rewires, layers them. I watched the shed from the tower window as she spoke. The firelight caught the edge of the shutter, just enough to cast a sliver of illumination across the dirt. Inside, the woman sat in the center of the floor, not chained, not muzzled, arms resting at her sides. She hasn't tried to hurt you? Not once. You still ready to kill her if she does? Cara didn't answer right away. That was answer enough. By the fifth night, something changed again. The alarms went off just before 2 in the morning. One of the tripwires in the east trench had snapped. Not the kind that rusts through or catches a wild dog. This wire had been clipped clean. Mosley and I responded first, rifles drawn, scopes active. Golza and the twins took the rear flank. When we reached the east wall, we found 3 infected wandering near the trench. No signs of aggression, just confused and twitching, like they'd been pulled towards something, and then lost the trail. 2 of them had tags wired to their necks. Salvage inventory tags, which meant someone had handled them recently. Behind them, just at the edge of the rise, I spotted movement. 2 human shapes crouching low. One of them had a torch soaked in some kind of tar, burning blue-black. They weren't attacking. They were guiding. Again. But this time, we saw them. We dropped both from a distance, clean shots through the chest. When we recovered the bodies the next morning, their skin was stained with bile and digestive fluid. They'd been wearing it like armor. One of them had a whistle carved from bone tucked into a leather pouch. It was caked in dried blood. That was when I knew for sure. This was deliberate. Someone out there was trying to lead the infected toward us. Slowly, carefully. Not to storm the post, but to test its edges, to learn its rhythms. We were being studied. The next day, I tripled the outer guard and issued direct orders. No movement beyond the fence without armed escort. All trades required sign-off. All doors locked at sundown. No exceptions. Even still, I kept thinking about the infected woman in the welding shed. She hadn't moved once during the commotion, not a single twitch when the sirens blared or the rifles cracked. Just sat, still and silent. Cara stayed near her, now almost constantly. No one came to the yard for 3 days. Not a single caravan. No smoke flares on the ridges. No movement along the eastern highway. Even the infected kept their distance. The silence should have been a relief. Less traffic meant fewer threats. But out here, stillness is never peace. Stillness means planning. It means eyes watching from brush lines, gauging when to strike. The pressure settled in the camp like a weight. No alarms. No voices above a whisper. Even the dogs had stopped barking, unless absolutely necessary. Everyone was waiting. The problem was, we didn't know for what. By the second evening, Mosley came to me privately and asked the question that had been building behind everyone's eyes since Connell left. How long are we keeping her? He didn't say her name. We never gave her one. Just referred to her as Cara's, or the woman in the shed. But we all knew who he meant, and I could tell from the way his hands stayed locked behind his back that he was giving me space to pretend it wasn't a demand. She hasn't attacked, I said. She's not spreading anything. She's locked down and accounted for. Sure, he replied, voice low. But half the guards are talking about it. You've seen what's happening outside. The way those herders use the infected like tools. People are starting to think she's not just here by chance. They think she's a beacon. It was a dangerous word. Beacon. The kind that shifts things inside a camp. Makes people start looking at their neighbors like variables. Like liabilities. She's not, I said. We're being studied, sure. But not because of her. Because we're the last stronghold this far south. That's what they want. Our walls. Our trade lines. Not her. But I knew even as I said it that it wasn't entirely true. We'd built this post out of rust and fire, kept it alive by clinging to our rules. Rules that kept things moving. Barter, guard shifts, threat protocols, perimeter alerts. We couldn't afford symbols. We couldn't afford philosophical debates about what was human or not. And yet Cara had dragged us into one, piece by piece. The others started distancing themselves from her that week. Not overtly, but meals were eaten on opposite ends of the fire barrel, radio calls ignored, tasks reassigned with awkward excuses. The twins avoided her entirely. Verno muttered darkly under his breath whenever she passed. Even Golzar, usually indifferent to everything but trade weight and muzzle velocity, had begun locking the generator compound behind her, even when she didn't go near it. On the fourth night, it cracked. A fuel drum went missing from the inner yard. We found the trail less than an hour later. Light boot prints leading from the generator bay to the eastern fence. No signs of a struggle, no blood, but the barrel was gone, and so was the backup carbine from the guard rack. Only one person wasn't accounted for that night. Cara. She hadn't disappeared. She was still in the shed, still guarding the woman, who remained motionless inside her corner of the floor. But she wouldn't say where she'd gone during the hour between guard rotations. Wouldn't answer why the barrel had vanished, or why the fence wire had been left unclipped. When I asked directly if she'd moved anything out of the yard, she didn't lie. But she didn't speak either. I knew what she was doing. She was planning to leave, or at least preparing for it. But where would she go? The answer came the next morning. Just before sunrise, Vetch came sprinting into the post, wheezing hard and bleeding from a gash across his scalp. His coat was shredded, and his radio dangled uselessly from his belt. We hauled him up into the yard and got him water before he could even speak. "They're coming," he gasped. "They're coming tonight. Raiders, I think. Maybe Firewatch. They've got infected with them, but not wild ones. Ones they're controlling, leading." We asked how many. He said he didn't know. Said he only saw 4 people with faces, but too many shapes in the smoke to count. Said he heard them talking. Something about the woman of silence, and how she would guide the next wave. The words hit harder than any gunshot. I left Mosley to lock down the yard, and went straight to the welding shed. Cara was already there, sitting on the floor, back against the opposite wall from the woman. Her rifle was beside her, unloaded. The woman was crouched, calm, watching Cara like a dog waits for a signal. "We have to kill her," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I just said it flat, like reciting a rule that had finally come due. Cara didn't move. She stared at me for a long time before she finally spoke. "She didn't bring them here. They're using her. That's enough. And if we don't deal with it, the others will. Their way. She's not violent. That doesn't matter anymore." Silence stretched between us like steel wire. Cara stood up slow and picked up the rifle. For a second, I thought she was going to hand it to me. Instead, she walked past me and out the door. I stayed, alone with the infected woman. I stared at her, and for the first time, I saw something different. Not intelligence, not emotion, just patience. The kind of stillness that predators have when they've already decided not to chase. She didn't flinch, she didn't reach, she just looked at me. And I understood then that this wasn't about what she was, it was about what we were becoming because of her. Then just after nightfall, the attack came, when the temperature had dropped and the wind died enough for the ash to fall straight down like snow. The yard was quieter than usual. I'd just finished my second perimeter sweep and was sitting with Mosley by the burn barrel when the first alarm tripped. Not a klaxon, those hadn't worked in weeks. Just the wind chime of rebar and wire strung across the east trench. It made a dry, metallic rattle that only happened when the tripline was pulled in a specific direction. Forward, not backward. That meant it wasn't the wind, and it wasn't wildlife. I was halfway up the south tower ladder when the first shell hit. It didn't explode like a proper mortar. It thudded, heavy and hollow against the gravel near the generator shed, bounced once, then hissed violently as chemical smoke began pumping out of holes drilled along the sides. The canister was a section of old drainage pipe, rigged with a pressure valve, likely powered by a homemade ignition cell. A minute later, a second one came sailing in, arcing from somewhere in the dark, and landed near the infirmary shack. More hissing, a new cloud, thick and yellow-grey, dense enough to erase the view of the far fence in seconds. Whoever was launching them wasn't trying to kill us outright. They were trying to blind and disorient, force us to choke, split our attention, then send something in to finish the job. That's when the infected came. Not a chaotic wave, not a frenzy. They emerged in slow columns, visible only as shadows through the thick gas. Some stumbled, others crawled, all moved with eerie coordination. The first ones into view weren't sprinting or howling. Their chests jangled softly. At first I thought it was gear, maybe salvage loops or debris. But when I dialed the magnification on the scope, I saw the truth. Someone had wired noisemakers to them. Glass jars filled with bearings, tied to chest straps, metal coils rigged inside milk cartons. They clattered as the infected moved, drawing attention to their location, while others flanked silently in the smoke. A distraction, a decoy. And behind them, just visible through the gaps in the haze, came the herders. Humans, unmistakably. Cloaked in black plastic, faces painted with blood and ash in crude symbols, wavy lines, open circles, spirals around the mouth. Each of them carried a whistle or a flashing lantern, and they used them in sequence, like shepherds working a perimeter. Some raised metal pipes wrapped in cloth and swung them rhythmically, guiding the infected forward, creating channels of movement. This wasn't chaos, it was strategy. We'd seen tactics like this before, but never with this much coordination, never this many. Mosley took a hit before I even realized we had a breach. A herder had slipped through the southern spike wall, must have found the section where the tire barricade had shifted from the last storm. He was fast, wiry, wielding a rusted hatchet in one hand and a stun baton in the other. Mosley dropped him with a 3-round burst, but not before taking 2 to the vest and a grazing cut across the hip. He stayed on his feet, bleeding but steady, and limped back to reload before heading back to the west fence. Gulzar wasn't as lucky. A ferrule broke through a loose wire on the north side, came in low and fast. One of the small ones, likely underweight and half-starved. It clamped down on his left hand as he tried to block the breach gate. He managed to stab it in the temple with a concrete spike, but the damage was done. The twins helped tourniquet the wrist and drag him back to the med post, cursing the whole way. I watched from the tower as the infected began to breach our outer defenses in small groups, not all at once, but timed. 5 from the west, then 6 from the east, then 3 more from the northern trench. Each group was preceded by smoke and sound. Our guards were responding, but the structure was slipping. We couldn't see more than 10 yards in any direction, and that let the herders move in close. Twice I saw figures dash past the main fence carrying torches laced with some kind of burning oil, meant to keep the infected close, draw them into the windward side of the yard. I gave the order to trigger the south mine line. A dull thump shook the ground, followed by a high-pitched whine and a collapsing shriek. One of the infected had hit a buried charge, improvised, built from an old industrial drill head packed with flammable resin. The flash lit up a section of the smoke long enough to see 3 herders scatter. One of them dropped a canister of offal, likely their bait stock, and ran into the fire. And through it all, the infected woman in the welding shed never moved. She was still visible through the upper grate, knees tucked, head tilted slightly to one side, calm in a way that made no sense, as if none of it applied to her. The yard was a war zone. Men were bleeding, screams echoed, yet she remained seated, unmoved, untouched by panic or noise. And then Cara returned. I didn't see where she came from, only that she emerged through the western smoke, moving fast and straight, rifle in one hand and a blood-streaked tarp bag in the other. Her coat was ripped across the shoulder, her boots were soaked with something dark, but she moved like she knew exactly where she was going. She ran to the shed, unlocked the reinforced grate with the spare key she never returned, and stepped inside without hesitation. I radioed down but got no answer, just static. 2 minutes later, she emerged again. The infected woman walked behind her, unchained, unrestrained, moving at a deliberate pace through the smoke as Cara led her toward the east trench. From the tower, I could see the breach. The infected had begun to cluster on that side, circling behind the last stack of tires and rebar. At least a dozen were moving in a line, and behind them, 5 herders waited, torches lowered, smoke trailing from their shoulders. When they saw Cara and the woman appear, they froze. I ordered the riflemen to hold fire. Every weapon in the tower stayed trained, scopes locked on the shapes in the smoke. But no one fired, not until we understood what was happening. Cara walked the infected woman to the trench line. The ground was muddy from runoff and soot, uneven with broken footing. Still, they moved with precision. When they reached the ridge just above the kill zone, Cara paused. She looked across the trench, straight at the herders, and then she raised her rifle. There was no hesitation, no words, no final gesture. She put one round through the infected woman's head, clean, center mass above the bridge of the nose, and dropped her where she stood. The effect was immediate. The herders screamed, not in rage, but panic. 2 dropped their torches. 1 bolted and stepped directly into the trench, triggering a secondary mine. The fireball lit up the entire eastern side like a signal flare. The others broke formation. The infected, once clustered, began to stagger in random directions, no longer guided, no longer focused. Without her, they had no anchor, no signal to follow. They wandered. They turned on each other. 2 collided and fell into the fire. 1 walked directly into the barricade and impaled itself. Others simply fled, disoriented, without scent or whistle to follow. The breach collapsed. By midnight, we held the post. We lost 3, 2 runners and a lookout who got caught in a collapse near the west wall. 8 more were wounded. 1 dog never came back. A fuel drum caught fire and cooked half our rations before the twins could drag it clear. But the gates held. The lines held. We were bloodied, exhausted, and 1 breath from collapse. But we stood. Later that night, I returned to the east trench. The woman's body still lay at the ridge, half in shadow, half in firelight. Her expression hadn't changed in death, just that same stillness, that same patience. Cara stood nearby, face unreadable, her rifle lowered. I didn't ask why. I didn't need to. She had done what I couldn't, what no one else dared to. She had cut the line before it could pull all of us under. We never found out how they knew about her, or if she really was guiding them somehow. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe something deeper, but it didn't matter. What mattered was we had drawn a line. Again. And the post stood, at least for now. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.